What is good, everybody? It is a Saturday. I'm actually, right after this, we'll be heading to the warehouse to get a bunch of work done with a couple of guys that got working with me. And man, let's check on in. 3.37, closing in on 3.4. Appreciate all the support. Again, 39,250 total purchase, closing in on 40,000 of those. Of course, Cover C is still available. The shirts, the hats, posters. We got plenty of those. So go ahead and the trading cards. Go ahead and get in. Certainly where you fit in. And thank you guys so much for the continued support. Today I'm going to switch. I'm not going to switch gears. It just, again, kind of shows everything upon which I talk about and have been talking about. I think in order to attempt to understand, if you care to do that, why so many folks are kind of frustrated with where comic book media has gone, comic books and comic book adaptations, where they've gone. You have to keep up with stuff like this because there's layers. It's not as simple as, well, this material is bad and therefore people don't like it. And that's the simplified version of it, and that's true. But in order to understand why people don't like it, to understand how it got in this sort of the direction that it's going, we need to highlight stuff like this. Now, I've made this argument many times. Marvel, this also applies to DC, but they're not in the business of really, they switch gears, let's say that. When they did that, I'll leave that up to interpretation, but comics obviously aren't a priority. We talked about that in the last video with DC. Yeah, I know DC Comics technically means Detective Comics. However, there's been some changes there with them dropping the comics part of the name, so it's not as obvious. I think that does say a lot about the direction, but they care more about film, media, merch. It's more of IP farming than anything is what these brands are acting as. But these last 4, 5, 6, however many years, 7 years or so, when I think it really took a nosedive and became obvious that so many people that were basically activists masquerading as comic book writers and entertainers, it's not to say that you obviously cannot have your own political or social views. Of course you can. But what happened is that then started to, as on the nose as it possibly could, represent the main thing that they're trying to, let's say, as their vehicle for what it is they do. No matter who the character is, they could be writing a character that couldn't be any more further from who they actually are. But the people that are the creatives are unable to separate themselves, their political views or social views, from that media. So I think a lot of that has to do with the connectivity with the Instagrams, the Twitters, the social media websites and all that, where so many folks have tricked themselves into believing that I think the retweets and the likes, they equal paying customers, or this is the way that the future is going, or this is how, you get a lot of retweets, you get tricked into believing that like, let's say, represents the entirety of the country or something of that nature, or the West. But that's not often how it is at all. Simply put, we have activists who can't separate their activism from their art because they are one and the same to them, and they are in control of characters that you might like. Look at this story. She-Hulk director Kat Coiro blames criticism of Marvel series CGI on our culture's belief in ownership of women's bodies. Now, I first read that headline. I was like, all right, something's got to be taken out of context here, because that doesn't even make any damn sense. But yeah, it's exactly what happened. If we read, they shared the opinion on the backlash of Jennifer Walters' uncanny Valley-esque looks during their appearance at the series' August 3rd Television Critics Association press tour panel. So they're using the press tour to actually let people in on how they feel about this type of stuff. Now, I want to preface it by saying this. I do not think that She-Hulk should have been used as CGI, or they shouldn't have CGI'd her. I think that was a waste. She is one of the, you want to talk about practical effects and all of that, and the time upon which that was most appropriate was now, because She-Hulk is not like Hulk. She's not one of these weird dimensions or about her. She's just very tall for a woman, of course, but there's, as tall as she is, there's women in the WNBA, for example, that are the same height as her. But you could have easily used camera tricks and all of that to make her appear bigger if you needed to in terms of her height. But she's just an athletic woman is how she was always built. That's how they separated her from regular Hulk. Now, yeah, I know with the War of the Realms and in the comic books as of recently, she kind of adopted more of a Hulk-like look. But seriously, this was a waste. And instead, they decided to CGI her in her entirety when she is Hulk, or She-Hulk, rather. But listen to this. I think the critique comes from feeling like they're able to tear apart the CGI woman. There's a lot of us, there's a lot of talk about her body type, and we based it on Olympian athletes and bodybuilders. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I personally have not heard anybody complain about that part. If she's built like an athlete, Olympian, a female Olympian, there is no issues there, none whatsoever. And I don't think that there's a prominent amount of people to even warrant acknowledging like that's the actual argument. If people are complaining about the CGI, they're more than likely referencing just how bad it looks, not necessarily how she herself, if you are going to have her built like an Olympian. I don't think that's the issues certainly here. Got all these ads popping up real quick. Says, but I think if we had gone the other way, we would be facing the same critique. I think it's very hard to win when you make women's bodies. I disagree. She-Hulk Tatiana Maslany would later echo this rhetoric while speaking as to what she enjoyed about playing the series title role. The series, as navigates the complicated life of a single 30-something actor who also happens to be a green 6'7" super-powered Hulk. So they even acknowledge, or she's acknowledging, the fact that she's 6'7". There are women that are 6'7", believe it or not. There are also tall women. If you couldn't get one 6'7", you could have got one at 6'3" and just made her look taller. That's not a problem. Like, that is not an issue at all. There's no shortage of actors, or excuse me, actresses that can play that role. They just neglected not to, because they are not hiring based upon merit anymore. That's not to say that she can't act. It's just, was she probably the best for this role of She-Hulk? Maybe not. Maybe not. Or you could have had someone else play her when she's She-Hulk version. Jen has had her life planned out, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, there's nothing here of relevance here. Here it is right here. So she said, we're so fixated on women's body, whether it's aesthetically or politically or in terms of rights or in terms of autonomy. I think we do this. I think what we do on this show is touch with all of these concepts, she concluded. Okay. So the argument here is that, at least the director, and I'm trying to find that actual quote. No, that's not it. Go and scroll back up. The actual quote here. Okay, so I think this has to do with our culture's beliefs and ownership of women's bodies. And I don't think that the argument is, and this is the whole sexist ploy and, you know, hey, men and objectifying women, though seems some of the biggest proponents of objectifying women often are other women. But that's neither here nor there. That's not the problem. See, what this is deflection of bad art. This is one of the times I didn't even say anything. This not, I mean, I've done this before, you know, people that actually listen to my arguments, but this is one of the times where it's like a lot of the complaints isn't with the fact she's a woman. Like I've said many times, She-Hulk is, to me, the best created, best handled, let's say, tokenized character to really ever exist in comics. That's the argument that I've made plenty of times. And even when I talked about her look in the trailer, I didn't say anything about it being woke or whatever. I was just like, well, this just looks terrible. And it does. CGI looks just awfully bad. But to deflect from the criticism, you have the director here that is then saying, well, this is because of the women and people thinking that they own women's bodies. It's like, no, it's just not good. You know, it's not good. And, of course, they want to, of course, survey that field and talk about the feminism aspect and all that and or rather touch on those concepts, excuse me. And that's fine, whatever. I'm not watching this. You could pay me to watch this. They'll never get it because they lead with activism first. Okay, that's all things must center around that. They lead with activism first. So it sucks. Bad art makes for bad art. Simple as that.